And sadly, but we will not be in position to give you the microphone. The next presentation will be devoted to long scans, which is a serious headache for OPSEC. Aleksey is going to tell us if they have managed to handle it. Hi, everyone. Yes, that's a real headache for all. Scanning is something long. There are plenty of vulnerabilities, and it's necessary to shorten this time. This is the topic of my presentation. I'm going to cover our security scan from cloud.ru and how to do scanning within those 30 clickbait times. So you already know my name. I'm a lead in charge of introduction and selecting a SaaS technology. A few words about the company. Cloud.ru is provider of cloud and security technology. We provide everything that has to do with it. As to the languages we use, we write in Python, in JavaScript, and TypeScript, and sometimes in C. Please memorize this information, you will need it. That's it. As to getting acquainted, let's proceed to the next step. Our space journey. I understand that those who are present here and who are watching us online are very serious people with high positions. However, let's assume that this presentation is a universe rather than a presentation, and it will be over in 1 hour. And during this hour, we'll go over the following milestones. Firstly, our background. I'll tell you what brought us to development, and I'll cover the shortcomings that we would like to eliminate in our solution. We will also go over static analysis components and engage in comparative analysis to compare the tools that we'll probably be using. And then we'll turn to something sacred. I mean the logic of our scan, what it contains, how the components work, and then we'll get down to something less sacred, which is the very first version of our scanner, what it was like and how it worked. And then we will upgrade to the final version, and then we will discuss the aggregator, what it is about, and where we're going to keep all our reports. In the end, I'd like to tell you how to make your solution recognizable and successful, not only in your company, but also in the outer world, among the users, with proper figures and comparisons. So let's begin. How it all began, the background. We as a company were eager to write secure code. So we started collaborating with vendor N. In the beginning, everything was okay and we liked it. People started growing the volume of scanning within their teams. Everything was all right. The number of vendors increased. And at a certain point in time, we reached 1,000 scans a day, which is a great figure. However, in practice, this figure is only great as a piece of stats. Once we've surpassed this threshold, the vendor ceased to work sustainably. And we engaged in those calls, tickets, bugs, fixes, telephone calls again, and so on and so forth. And over some time, it started taking a lot of our time. I'm speaking about our business time. And after all this, the decision was made to do two things. First, collect everything that we didn't like and stop using it. And then we started working. But prior to reaching the next milestone of our journey, I'd like us to prepare ourselves. I collected some insights that will help you to understand this topic better. You're already familiar with most terms, but this will make your life easier. First, what do we have in our reference book? The first term is SBOM. software bill of materials. It's a list of dependencies, files, libraries, and modules that belong to a specific service or system or infrastructure. It may look like this. Then, SAST. Many of you are familiar with SAST. It's one of the application testing methods. Our validators look at mathematical and syntaxis errors and identify unsafe code blocks and connected libraries. Next. What's next? It's SCA, software composition analysis, which process is designed to identify components, especially open source components comprised in our code bases and projects. SCA analysis enables vulnerability search in the libraries that we use in order to make decisions if we really want to use the library. Next. Leaks detector. It is a utility intended to scan our code base, which scans our repository for vulnerabilities that may be found in the code, in the repository. And it's a very useful tool we'll be using later. Now, the dependencies trees, you all are familiar with its notion. Just a reminder.
Что такое лицензии компонентов в рамках текущего доклада?
Component license in the context of my presentation. In this process, we trace how well the components comply with CI agreements and their presence in the open source software. A few words about our format. In the first place, it's Cyclone LX. It's an advanced SBOM format that doesn't only allow to trace data as to modules and components, but also data about vulnerabilities. Next, Serif, just 6 letters, but it's a pretty complex abbreviation or term. What does it do? It collects single format statistical analysis data, allowing ADEs and CI/CD systems to communicate and interwork from the perspective of the vulnerabilities identified by SARF. Now, and Aleksey report, which are the reports comprising JSON files with information as to when, how, and who committed sensitive Git repository data. And now SLA will know about it. It stands for Service Level Agreement. But in this context, it's slightly different. In this case, SLA is the time that is spent on fixing vulnerabilities, which may vary from vulnerability to vulnerability for low severity. It can take 20 days to fix, and for more severe cases, it may be 3 days only. And now the quality gate. In this case, the quality gate is threshold value, the admissible number of vulnerabilities per project. We'll get back to this notion later. Okay, that's it. As to this dumb stuff, which is pretty boring, let's get back to the next stage. Components and comparative analysis. What does our statistical analyzer include? First of all, it's SARF, then it's the bomb collector. Then there goes the SCA platform that will be analyzing your SBOM files and the testers, but I would like to speak about the testers separately. Why? Is because it's these types of tests that are written by the developers themselves. Well, they could outsource it to security, but not in the sense of our discussion. So, what are the ingredients of one's own solution? Let's discuss the characteristics that we were keeping in mind in our company, and let's also discuss the best practices. So, first and foremost,
Это две утилиты.
is the type and the CDLG bot.
Кто разработчик?
These two utilities, well, I'm not going to discuss who developed them,
Сейчас это не важно.
how
Сейчас мы обратим
it's
внимание
not important now.
те параметры, которые
What's important
известны лично нам.
is the parameters that were of interest to us. They include
Компания.
scanning of the company's development languages.
На каких языках мы пишем?
Previously, I mentioned our languages.
Значит, это однозначно.
If we see them here, it's an advantage
Далее.
to both zip-tool and CDF-GIN.
И
Then creating the dependencies tree and monitoring the sessions, which is yet another advantage. However, CIF is based on
И сравнительно это обычно про плюс.
Go, and the other one is based on JavaScript.
Действительно, это заложено.
And here we see these pluses and minuses. So the question comes,
На чем он написан. Однако,
what's the difference?
разница есть. Сейчас расскажу.
Why should we care about the programming language,
Корректной работы на
the CFT, to work correctly?
языках программирования он требует для себя подготовку
Better say,
под все языки, которые мы хотим сканировать.
it requires an environment supportive of all the programming languages, and we have at least 5 of them.
Замкнутый круг.
And this is a kind of trap.
Образ, в котором будет
We can come up with an image
записано все,
in which the scan will be run,
которые мы хотим сканировать.
supporting all the environments for all of the languages that we want to scan. However, it will stop being light.
Большую скорость
The
развертки
image will become pretty hefty, and the deployment time will be huge. Or the other way around, we can prepare environments and the runtime for every language, each language or all the languages at a time.
логику.
However, how to implement correct logic for the preparation of such environment for each specific repository language is still unclear. In the first place, because I am a DevOps engineer, I don't like programming very much,
Всегда приходится это делать. Однако,
although I have to do it as part of my job.
самый главный аргумент в данном сравнении.
Nevertheless, the fact that I am a DevOps engineer is not the main thing.
Bыстрее скачивается, быстрее
Those things based on Go are faster to download and deploy.
информацию.
They are slightly faster to collect all the data, but this does not matter. The most important thing that it can scan all the supported languages out of the box
Скачивание модулей.
without any additional module downloads or environment preparation.
Всей боли, о которой я сейчас
Just out of interest, to visualize all the pain points I mentioned, I brought here the information about the conflict of our scanner with Tiftom and Coxan.
Это примерно вот так.
In regard to all the languages that we support, it may look like this.
Образ с сифтом занимается.
The SIFT image
С почти гиг.
takes 100 megabyte, while CDGen
Почему тут был?
takes up to 972,
Мы с
which makes it clear why we opted for a SIFT.
чем-то его.
Okay, we have our SBOM.
В левом углу
Now we need some tool to analyze it.
в правом dependency check. Это
We have dependency track and dependency check.
чтобы анализировать компоненты.
These two platforms are designed to analyze the components we collect.
Языки.
Both of them are supportive of all the programming languages we're interested in, and they kindly provide recommendations as to fixing the vulnerabilities that they may find.
Вот
But
так вышло, что он вроде давно на рынке.
somehow dependency check does not support SBOM,
Из возможных форматов, которые могут нам
although they are well known
только XML.
and established developer, they don't do it.
И
So this
плюс,
brings us to dependency track.
это интеграция с агрегатором, а именно
Another important thing is integrator
поговорим чуть позже.
integration. Sorry for this,
Сравнением,
but we'll get back to it later.
давайте немного отдохнем.
That's enough.
Перейдем к логике,
As the comparison, we're done here. Let's get to the logic of the scanner itself.
как это все происходит.
What should be present in a scanner?
Просто и примитивно.
How does it work? To put it plain and simple, we run our scan and get a report. Once we've got the report, we send it to the aggregator, where aggregation takes place, and then we need to work with the vulnerabilities. But I hope that
Нормально разберем, что там есть.
you will not be satisfied with this information, so let's dig deeper.
Здесь мы
The first stage is when we are just exploring the situation. We add a job and set a rule for our job to be run. It can be involving triggers, something else. The next stage is the actual scanning, which involves all the scanning tools that are present. And it's based on the results of the stage that we get reports from each scanning tool. Then we come to the analysis stage. At this third stage, we get all the reports from all the tools, we analyze them and send them for aggregation. This seems to be it. But you may have noticed, and there is another stage, and I couldn't leave it out. Currently, we're speaking about the first version of the scanner, which only comprised 3 stages. So the first version, our first attempts. Initially, we were in no position to call it a scanner even. We couldn't call it anything. Why? Because they were 7 roles and just to launch. However, it's the first version of our scanner allowed us to understand what fast scanning was about and gave us an impetus for further development. Let's have a look at it. Don't forget, it's a GitLab CI job, and it was a huge effort. We'll be discussing it by code elements first. The first stage is a CAP. We set a task for a static analyzer. We specify all the parameters, all the tokens, and URLs. And we specify the report folder where we put our scanning reports. It is stored locally on the runner and stays there until a certain time. Then we launch our SBOM compiler builder. It does that in the cyclone JSON format and put it in the proper folder. Then we launch Hog, which is a detector that forms reports in JSON and put it in .report folder again. This was our first scanner version. I would hate to dig any deeper why it is that it was, and why it failed to work, and why we replaced it for something else. Well, at this, I'm done with the scanner and how its tools work. What's next? Now we start working with our URLs and sending reports. And the next task is to deliver all those reports to the proper platforms. For this, we create a project and a lot of instances in the aggregator, if they are not there yet, and send our scanning report there. Then we do the same with Truffle Hog, but we don't write anything into our variables. And the joint effect in the response to the request yields us some JSON information. And through the queue, we parse our essence ID and write it into our variable. We will need it at a later stage. Well, we're done with Truffle Hog. We don't write anything into it. We just send a report. As long as they are still not present. And at this stage, our aggregation process changes slightly. We don't send the report to the aggregator right away. First of all, we send the SBOM file to the SCA platform. In our case, it's an additional track. So what do we do here? It's the same logic. We create entities that are necessary for the project and yield them for file analysis. Then we use this particular and scary URL, and we parse our variable in the JSON language. We will need it later. And it's not only me who likes it. obviously. And this is the final stage. We have to fine-tune our project on the SA platform to make sure that everything works as is expected. And we have to specify several parameters for each and every project that we create. The first parameter is not reactivate. Do not reactivate is self-explanatory. It's designed to synchronize the results of the SA platform with the aggregator, and it does not change anything. Well, if you mitigate it, it will be an accepted risk, and its status will not be open. What's next? The next parameter is engagement ID. Here, we explicitly assign an entity to each parameter. It's where we send our SA report, and this entity is contained in the detector job aggregator. And the process is as follows. Once we sent in our SBOM, it has stayed in our SA platform. It was analyzed. All the vulnerabilities and errors have been found, and we send this information to a specific project with the hidden job in order not to get confused where and what we have. And the last touch will be our re-import parameter that does not allow similar vulnerabilities to look like the same entity. And that's it. In the end of the job, we can see this beautiful phrase. Now you can check your vulnerabilities on, and then there goes link to the aggregator that takes our variable containing the results of all the scanning tools that were engaged in our job. Something like this. Now, let's take a look at what we achieved. I'm in a position to say that it took us a lot of time. We just did it and optimized it. And we achieved full-fledged scanning with just one command. Please note, another stage, quality gate, has been added. How does it work? Well, basically, the first three stages are the same. After that, our scanner requests information about all the vulnerabilities identified and their levels from all the scanning tools. Then it compares them with the expected value and says, if the number of found vulnerabilities is bigger than I allow, the job is done. If the number is smaller, the job will be considered successful and the pipeline runs on. And we proceed to the builds, to all those deploys and commits and so forth. So, to the final version of our scanner. It looked like this. Just one run command and nothing else. And it proved to be the best solution. No need to explain to anyone what to do, how to do it, or what parameters are in charge of what. Just copy-paste and you're done. And it will work. Please note, we keep our artifacts. Why? Let's have a look at what is in there. There are all those reports that look like this. From top to bottom is SCAP, it's CIF, it's GitLab, and so forth. Why do we need those naked reports that we keep for a couple of days more? Ostensibly, they're just consuming memory. However, it's not that obvious, because we're in the very beginning trying to fix a lot of errors of the initial stage. When we tried to introduce all the repositories, we end up with a lot of errors, and we need a small debugging exercise. We can look into it, find information about all those vulnerabilities, and there are also dedicated people. There are people who like to read your reports. Just read the text. I don't know why, I can't explain this, but it is what it is. Let's proceed to the next milestone or station 6, which is about aggregation.
1000 сканов в день.
I mentioned before, we have 1,000 scans per day. A slide ago, we saw that we had 4 reports per scan.
Ну, 4000 отчетов получается.
Well, it yields us 4,000 reports.
Нужно что-то с ними делать. Мы не можем
And we need to do something about them.
разбирать 4000
And we can't do it manually. We can't treat 4,000 reports manually a day.
Что у нас есть?
So, it means that we need an aggregator.
Это либо дефект
Let's have a look. What's out there? It's either defective John or the other one.
количество плюсов у того и у другого. Давайте посмотрим на основные.
Each of them having their respective advantages and disadvantages.
Каждый имеет
Both allow doing triage or vulnerabilities. They know how to manage vulnerabilities, how to get comments, how to manage the vulnerability status, and so on and so forth.
инструментами сканирования.
Both have them.
Наверное, стоит
Integration with scanning tools.
дефект.
Here, I should probably give you more details. The first one
Огромное количество интеграций, просто немыслимое.
has a lot of integrations.
Имеются разные
It's inconceivable.
сканирования и с разными форматами.
For these different scanning tools
У
are
вас
supported and in different formats as well.
коробки дефект
You may not have integration out of the box with delete dojo, detect dojo, sorry.
проблем никаких.
However, otherwise you don't have any problems.
Есть два плюса, которые нужны.
Defect dojo has 2 advantages that you may need, that we need in our company,
А именно это
which actually influenced upon our choice. It's integration with trackers
о котором мы говорили.
and support of SLAs. Well, in the previous case, I meant integration with Jira.
Выстроить грамотный процесс vulnerability.
In the future, it will allow us to better do operability management and monitor it as well. So we opted for Defect Dojo.
Мы его назвали Cloud Guardian, и в дальнейшем я его буду называть.
We didn't like the name, so we renamed it Cloud Guardian.
Что у него есть из коробки?
Let's discuss
И
its
удобная
advantages
новая фишка. Она
out of the box. It's
дорабатывать.
intuitive and user-friendly API, allowing to
Это прям огромный.
enhance and improve this API and work with it.
Сразу. Далее.
This is a huge advantage.
Безусловный плюс.
Next.
Интеграция с
As I mentioned before, integration with task trackers, Jira in our case, is a great advantage. Next,
огромный, просто огромный, широкий список
another,
форматов самых
it's a huge list of supported formats, the formats that are supported by Defect Dojo.
своих парсеров, выбора инструментов из
It allowed us not to limit ourselves to our parsers.
инструментов.
We can select
Оказалось.
those tools that were preferable to us,
Далее. Отдельным плюсом
and we could get them integrated as well.
я бы, наверное, закинул на
A separate
бенчмарков по типу
plus or advantage is the availability of OLAP SPS benchmarks.
процессу бенчмарк.
It's a very useful thing. To use those benchmarks,
И придется там культуру
you may need a lot of time. You'll also need to introduce the culture of those things. So it's for reference only here. And last but not least,
опросные аудит-листы.
by default, you can create
Мы сейчас не про
polls,
совсем не про обсек, поэтому давайте
but we're not discussing OPSEC, so let's move on.
Что есть по минусам?
And this brings me to disadvantages. And here we see a lot of disadvantages. Why? Because they are Python-based, and there is no role model for it. Nothing comes out of the box except for the reader
Последствием этой
and RBAC.
однако это минус.
Of course, we corrected it
Что у нас дальше?
later. However, it should be available out of the box.
И
What comes next?
отчасти это минус.
It's open source. And to some extent, it's a disadvantage. I'll explain myself. If you want
Там залетел новый функционал и
to fix a bug, or probably there is new functionality,
стигнет бук
and by any chance you have not checked it
на вентилятор.
for vulnerability, the shit will hit the fan. So it's a true disadvantage.
Выделить это
Another disadvantage, and an important one,
это низкая
and I'd call it a pain point, is its slow throughput.
конкурентная скорость и отказоустойчивость.
For its speed and
Очень жирная нода. Ну, при
failure tolerance to be admissible, a very powerful node is required with no enhancements. Otherwise, Defect Dojo consumes a node of 100 CPUs, which is not really cool for a simple thing intended to collect reports. So whatever great your open source solution is, you will still need to enhance it and customize it to work with it. This seems to be it. Let's move on. How do we work with vulnerabilities? What do we do to make sure that it's effective and efficient?
This is not just a best practice where this is something that we're doing within the company, and we do that very well. First thing we do, and this is something that we run into when we consider the first version of Scan, we are aggregating all the reports from scanning into the pipeline. Then we divide and aggregate our reports by different essences, and these essences would depend on type of scanning. SAST, SA, or exit. Then it can be replenished with different dosed grep runtime scanner container data, but at the moment this looks like that. Then we set flexible SLA for critical, non-critical projects. Criticality of the project depends on you. If you do believe that in your project it is very important to fix a vulnerability, then this is a critically important thing that cannot wait even a second. Do that project critical. Proceeding from the criticality of the project, some of the configuration parameters may change. In our case, these are different figures for quality gate, and SLA for vulnerabilities would be different for critical and non-critical products. Then, Jira alert. For every vulnerability that you have identified depending on the project, we send tasks to Jira. The task priority in Jira depends on the criticality of the vulnerabilities. We set the critical in terms of priority or low if it is low, and the role model. Here I would like to elaborate on that in more details, and it is included into the flow of working with vulnerabilities. You build a model within your aggregator. The vulnerabilities should not be just accessed, easily accessible to all the team members, if these are the vulnerabilities of their projects, but there is another node. This is the role model that would help, at least, to improve the security of the paper on which you put the code, from the box which is called the project portfolio, which contains all the components, hard code, soft code, everything is there. So you have to provide for secure access to the aggregator, and you have to ensure the right access to every team member so that they have access only to their own projects. Let us assume that you made a very good product which works very well, but it works well within your team. The company that can use your scanner doesn't know anything about that. Let's have a look at what can be done and how it can be done so that scanner is used within the company. Next slides, and apologize to everyone, probably this is something wrong. So unification, this is the success factor behind our all success. You have to embrace all the code database within your company. Let's have a look at the requirement which is set to that success. First of all, this is accessibility. The access to the image of scanning and documentation on that has to be placed in the generally accessible place, but within your perimeter. So it means that it can be stored where it is accessible for any team member who needs that. Next, unification. Everything has to work as a copy-paste. In our case, just like in your case, the success from coverage with scanning depends on the type of implementation. The type of implementation, this is about job in BitLab. And
Если DevOps заняты, это делают разработчики.
It can be done by the developers. They would introduce the scans, and developers are very lazy people to do that.
Не было интересно это делать.
And they were not interested in doing that.
Это нужно.
They understand that they have to do that,
В зрелости
that it would promote the company further on
это было им не нужно.
in terms of security,
Старайтесь подогнать
but they certainly are not eager to act.
Можно было
Try to make sure that actually use copy and paste and it works. In our case, this is just one
строчек кода, которые вам
variable and 12 lines of the code that I showed to you in the final visual of the scan.
версионирование.
Next,
Разделять
this is about versions. You have to divide releases, fixes, and everything like that. It is important not only for you not to get confused in different versions, but this is also important for the people who are using your product.
что-то в нем делать.
When the people see that you're doing something about that, and let that be just some small fixes,
Интерес к тому,
the
что вы
people will
делаете, интерес.
feel interest towards what you do,
Changelog, все это вам поможет.
and semantics will help you to visualize your work.
Документация.
Documentation.
Её понятно и доступно.
You have to do that
Чуть-чуть побольше.
fully and accessible way.
Документация — это
So documentation.
внедрение.
This is the
Всё начинается сначала. Да.
cornerstone of everything you do,
Потому что если вы внедрите,
because if you
потом решите
introduce the product and then you try to complement that with the document, so you will not actually have time in order to
выглядело хорошо,
come up with the document, so you will be
внедрение и покрытие вашего
overwhelmed with the questions. I would identify three quite simple but important items. First of all, this is about the accessibility.
найти каждый сотрудник
Should be a place where any employee of the company may find, for instance, in Wiki.
позволяет политика ведения вики, кидайте в корень.
And if Wiki actually allows that, you can store that in the root. And the way
Если вдруг человек не
should be
знает, куда там нужно пойти,
so short that if a person doesn't know where to find that document,
он просто полезет в вики.
he or she would just go to the wiki, and he or she would happy enough if they find the wiki right
Древовидная структура документации.
in the very root of your
Хотелось бы еще ответить,
tree-type document.
что
Another thing I would like to note,
тоже важна и даже в этом плане.
the tree-type
Страница
document is also quite important.
мануал по внедрению. Там будет
Let there be the manual on deployment, which would describe what has to be done, what variables have to be added,
а в
and
дочерних страницах пускай там будет
in the daughter pages, let there be some information about the codes of mistakes, the Q&A, and some other private things which probably would not be even read by anyone.
информация.
So, not the most important information. Then,
Понятно. Документация должна быть написана так,
the document have to be executed in the plain language that anyone would understand that, even if they have nothing to do with the code development.
или
Whether this is the developer
ну, кто-нибудь из
or, I do not know, some of the managers from the sales or procurement. It's very important to render quite sophisticated technical
так и для сеньоров.
things in plain language
Полную
to everyone.
о том,
Every employee has to have full information about how to
при этом
implement, how to deploy the product that you have developed without necessarily Googling that,
время
and it would certainly facilitate the coverage
и
of your database with the scanners. And item number 3, collect the feedback.
пишется для широкой аудитории.
The documents
Практически
are being written for the broad audience, for all the employees of your company.
фидбэк.
Collect feedback.
Рассказывайте о своей документации, где
Tell people about your documents, manuals, where it is being located.
с вашим сканом.
Talk to the community, tell them how to use
И собирать.
it, and collect the feedback.
Фидбэк поможет
This is the feedback that would help you
пунктам, которые
to comply with the first two items that I've spelled out before, accessibility and plain language.
все эти три пункта помогают
All these three items
модернизировать страницу
help to modernize the page on Wiki and to turn that from just an ordinary text into a powerful tool, helping to implement anything within the company.
уже было проверено.
And that has been time checked. Okay, we're done with the documents. Item number 8, and we're approaching the end. Figures matter. Let's have a look at why we did that and what we came up with, proceeding from prerequisites. Let me step aside and let's have a look at that. Repository, Go language, and number of components 50, number of code lines 20,000, and the actual time of scanning is 10 seconds, and less than 1 time for collecting. In the left-hand side, we see the previous decision that we used. So the essence that you see there, this is Java scanning. On the right-hand side, you see our solution. So what we see there, the previous solution, once been scanned with these prerequisites, took 1.5 seconds, and actually we are doing that within 57. And immediately a question emerges. Where those 30 seconds that are indicated in the report? That's easy. This is Java. This is the work of the job. And we have some retention time, initiation of containers, initiating of containers of containers, and all that actually may take about 40 seconds, and this is what you deduct from every job. And we would get really those results that we wanted. Why I'm so preoccupied with the figures? Why have such a fixation to the figures? Because seconds matter. We had to get the most out of the big process of scanning the code base and to reduce that to the maximum. GS, 2,000 lines of code, about 3,000 components, 102 files, SAT 20 seconds, and less 1 second in order to aggregate the database. And here we see the difference. Before, it would take about 13 minutes and 41 seconds. Now, on average, it takes about 2.5 minutes. Next, the final prerequisite for today, that's Python. What we may see here, 3,500 lines of code, 62 components, but there is a big number of scanned files, 305. Time of scanning is 30 seconds and less than 1 second to assemble the database. Here we see that the difference is not so big. Similarly, just 1 minute. But still, this is about making time shorter. And if we try to make sure that the whole job is done within 30 seconds, this is not possible. Therefore, if we just halve the time of scanning of one language, this is quite a good result. What we benefited, why this really works, and why it started working faster. Just because we did 2 things. First of all, we revised the logic of collecting the data, and we are no longer using the G-scan. We compared that, we see that there is a SIFT, and we started using SIFT for collecting data. SIFT gained us a lot of time. Also, it should be noted that we no longer scanning the components in some standalone system. We're doing that from one job, and we reduce the time for the network retention, initiating some other system. So now it looks like that. And final station of our today's journey, unfortunately, it is almost over. These are the results. The main result of our work is an active process of preparing our product for the legislation. This is one of the objectives of our company, and the scan helped us to do that faster. We're scanning faster, we do triage faster, we fix everything faster. Now I'd like to focus on 24/7 support of our product. As far as the development now is done by our company, the internal in-house forces. This is not a vendor solution. We managed to provide for on-call solution for all the problems. It helps us very actively and proactively identify all the bugs at that stage of development and debug that very quickly. Next, have flexible SLA settings and criticality of the projects sorting. We managed to do the sorting and to set the priorities. And besides, it provided for availability of management and better control over that process. And the final thing, this is about the uptime. Bear in mind that we are developing that ourselves, we're fixing that ourselves, and we're collecting feedback from our company ourselves. We are fixing everything ourselves to the extent it's possible. So now we reach the uptime of about 100%, and it doesn't go down. And as far as this is an open source, it is in Python, it's going to crash eventually, but we are working to make sure that it doesn't happen. But for others, those who do not see all the advantages of that scan, this product has become the best solution than before, and it is now more stable. And to conclude, I want to say that I want to quote, what matters is not what we see, we know that this is something that we have to fear. What matters is what we do not see, because we do not know what it can be. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much for your report. And now we have a Q&A session, following which you will have to select 3 best questions, and I pass the floor to Catherine. Let's begin with the question for beginners. What job is about? Well, thank you so much for this, your question. This is about the launch of certain scenario, executing certain commands, or a whole tool. Job in that context, this is a process of performing a certain fragment in CI/CD pipeline. If I have to tell you what this pipeline is about, what CI/CD is, it will take several more hours. Okay. How scans impact optimization of the decision-making process in the company? Now, in essence, I don't want to praise the company, but after we learned to sustainably work with the vulnerabilities, when the tools do not crash, when we are scanning fast, when jobs do not run out of time, everything is working much faster. Within 2.5 months since we proceeded to the new vulnerability base, when we started using our own, within 2.5 months, we fixed 13,500 vulnerabilities, and that's the result, because this is half of all the vulnerabilities that we have identified. Thank you so much. Tell us in more detail about the effectiveness of scanning. Any statistics regarding false positive, and how did you minimize that? Thank you so much for this question. Well, this is a bit off topic, but still the answer is, regarding vulnerabilities and false positive, well, we have the following process. Almost in every project, in every team, we have a security champion. We're just a developer who loves working with vulnerabilities. He will process the vulnerabilities of the project and would note them. There are just several status that might be assigned to closed, assigned to false positive. In case of false positive, security champion will collect the list of vulnerabilities that, as he believes, are false positive, and would approach our OPSEC officer. Then OPSEC officers would triage this list of vulnerabilities and then would give an answer whether this is really false positive or you have to work manually and fix it.
Dmitry спрашивает, с какой
какой периодичностью, если да,
with what periodicity
размеченные как ФП
you
или несущие
actually
реальных бизнес-рисков? В случае, если изменены зависимости или окружение,
get rid of the vulnerabilities that are marked as critical, because of the business functions, the criticality may change. Once dependencies change, the importance of vulnerability may change. How it impacts the business, I am not sure, but how it may affect the work with vulnerabilities, well, just the same way as the work with all the vulnerabilities. We have a new vulnerability, and it has some criticality. Depending on the criticality, we start to work with it. And then it would turn out that, for instance, we have so much time to work with it, to note that as false positive or to fix it. Who will be penalized if he or she fails to fix it? So after we change certain components, the cycle of working with vulnerabilities doesn't change, just it starts anew. So we identified vulnerability, we have to work with it. You said that Defect Dojo has a lot of vulnerabilities because of Python. Why is it so? No, in essence, it was my joke. It happened so that we decided to scan that, and it turned out that it is as faulty as any. And I decided to combine those two disadvantages. Well, I believe that this is a disadvantage because it is not as posh as it may be in other language.
Продолжая тему оркестратора.
To continue the topic of orchestrators, what do you think about white spots compared to Defector Joe? I've not considered that yet. Well, in essence, we had a Defector Joe, we had a vendor aggregator, and we had a Faraday. We didn't go further, I just didn't have time in order to look at something else because the situation was critical. And these all things, scanners and aggregators, that they have to be addressed very quickly. And did you manage to address the problem of long time taken to upload the reports? Well, huge reports take a lot of time to upload, download. We try to bypass that before we can address that globally, because we will rewrite that in different language. At the moment, this is a little bit optimized logic of obtaining the logic, reports, making reports, and we optimize the parser, but these are particular things of developers, so I cannot tell you for sure what we did and how we did it. What did you do about PTI? Did you fine-tune the rules for the efficiency of scanning? And again, thank you so much for the question. Well, in terms of SS rules, we didn't do anything. We complemented that with the search for sensitive data. Apart from scanning vulnerabilities, it may identify something else. For instance, regular expressions. Yes, we find you them. Okay, thank you. Does it make sense to speed up the work of a job which runs a SAST if a SAST may take dozens of minutes?
Well, we
have not run into such a situation when it would take dozens of minutes. I think that we have first come up with such a situation, then address that question, whether it would be worth doing that. Because our microservices do not yet take dozens of minutes for scanning. Thank you. Roman asked a question. Why you put everything into one job? Because if one scan crashes, the next one would not start. There is even more provocative answer, because it works much faster and more stable. We had a vendor which did that another way around. We look at how the vendor does it, and we decided to test our solution. We did an aggregate of all the tools, and if SAST crashes, then the report would not be full-fledged. Yes, we'll have information about the libraries and modules that we're about to connect, information about hardcode, but we would lack the most important thing. There'll be no information about what our developers did. SAST has never crashed on its own, as far as I can remember. As SCR platforms never crashed at all.
Коллектор, он в принципе не может упасть. У него
And Sbom collector
посмотрите на файлики.
cannot crash because it just collects everything in one place.
Все-таки получилось ускорение.
Why?
Вообще время работы
Actually, you managed to accelerate the work of SAST.
Сети или еще какие-то вещи.
Я не уверен, что
I'm not sure
устроен правильно, если вопрос именно
that this is a right question if you speak about SAST. We didn't accelerate that.
мы ускоряли все направления скана. Если мы говорим не о SAST-анализаторах, а о
If we are not speaking about SAST analyzer, but about statistical analysis, we accelerated that. And
скорости разработки,
it helped us to
и
improve triage of vulnerabilities, improve the scanning, and at least there are less problems. People started believing the fact that security scans and statistic analyzers are really quite good, quite efficient, and the people started on their own implementing different tools, our scanner, and triaging the vulnerabilities. And we felt happy when the developers wanted to send vulnerabilities and fix vulnerabilities on their own.
Спасибо за доклад. По ходу рассказа появился такой вопрос. Чем обусловлен
I have the following question. Why you
спасибо за вопрос.
set such a sequence of launching the scanners? In the first version of Scan, this sequence was not driven by anything. We just launched it because of nothing, just because of the speed of the work. First, we took the one which is most time-consuming, and then in the final version of scanning, this is our sync.
Инструменты сканирования запускаются.
All the scanning tools are launched asynchronously and work simultaneously. How did you optimize the work on analyzing the reports? Analyzing reports. Okay.
Смысл вопроса в том,
I wonder what the essence of the question is. What we did as a software or in terms of the people?
ранее было описано.
In terms of the people, I've described that before. We appointed security champions who are triaging the vulnerabilities, and in case they lack knowledge or in case of false positive, may turn to the AppSec, who have the final word on the work with some particular vulnerabilities. Thank you. Aleksey,
написанием документации? Нанимать отдельных людей или выделять?
what about the documents? Do we have to do that on ourselves or outsource that? Well, standalone people are not needed for that. You don't have to describe that for the people who are not knowledgeable about anything. I wrote a book on my own, and I put myself in the shoes of a junior who has to understand what scanner is about, what tools it consists of, what tools are there, what platform is, why this is called this way. I just described these things and made links to everything. Then published screens, what you have to click once again and once again to click in order to get the vulnerabilities. And it worked very well.
Спасибо.
Okay, thank you so much. What measures you have taken in order to make sure that the scanning process not only is fast, but also would not miss complicated vulnerabilities that may require deeper analysis? Thank you so much. That was a very interesting question.
И наверняка на него можно ответить что-то.
And I do think that we may answer that the way you can write your own SAST rules, or you may use another system analyzer. You have to understand what sophisticated vulnerabilities are about. These are vulnerabilities which it is difficult to exploit. It is very difficult to exploit them, but at the same time, they are nowhere in the vulnerability database. Then there's nothing we can do before our developers want to triage and to see actually where this can be hacked. So let's wait until they emerge in our NVT database. Dmitry asks, 13,000 vulnerabilities per 20,000 lines of code. What vulnerabilities were there and what was not identified by the analyzer? Not 20,000 lines of code contain 13,000 of vulnerabilities. All in all, the projects that we scanned within 2.5 months were identified 20,000 vulnerabilities and 13,000 were fixed. It was not one project alone which has so many vulnerabilities. I do think that the developer would be dismissed once he commits so many vulnerabilities. Aleksey asks whether it would be whether there would be a possibility to identify the criticality. Yes, it is driven by the time frame. The time, actually, 2.5 months elapsed since initializing and offering this idea until its interim implementation. Certainly, there would be a lot of functions. The opportunity to assess the criticality of the project, there would be some dynamic timeouts that would accelerate the scanning time. There would be different types of notification, integration that may merge with our different internal systems. Certainly they would emerge, as I said. When we spoke about documentation, we collected back about what our developers want, what our DevOps and OPSEC want. Everyone who interacts with our scanner, with our and proceeding from their knowledge, we would come up with a roadmap. Thank you. Thank you.
Алексей спрашивает, проводится ли углубленное сканирование, когда
Do you do a profound scanning when it may open up the way for others?
Там было несколько вариантов решения, один из которых это...
Thank you for this question. There were several solution options, one of them being finding the parent component and fixing it. In one case, it helped. In some other case, it entailed more difficulties. We fix one vulnerability, there comes another one. And it's not because we did something wrong. It just couldn't be done differently. So step by step, we started writing our own libraries and modules. And in some cases, it proved to be even faster than looking for a way to recover a vulnerability. How can we use your tool for a developer to get scan results faster once the code has been changed without waiting for the next steps and aggregation? Thank you for this question.
Если рассматривать отдельные этапы,
if we consider specific stages, sending scanning reports to the aggregator goes immediately after the specific tool has completed its operation. We have a branch, we corrected something there. As I mentioned, we launch our tools asynchronously. SAS works the slowest. Once it's done, the report is sent. You don't have to wait until the other tools finish or the job is over. Once your internal scanner informed you that SAS analysis is over and the report is sent, you can switch to the project and do triage for the next vulnerability. Have you considered scanning new dependencies with SAS in order to use the results in all the subsequent projects using this particular dependency? Thank you very much for the question. As to dependency scanning with SAS, I should say, in our case, SAS is a secondary scanner from the perspective of dependency. Another platform deals with it, and SAS is just auxiliary here as to fixing other projects' vulnerabilities. Do I understand it correctly?
Результатом работы с уязвимостью является либо ее
the result of dealing with the vulnerability is either fixing it or accepting the risks. We have one vulnerability which is multi-present, and our InfoSec's know that there is such a vulnerability which is present in multiple projects. The OPSEC see it, and they notify the others that there is such a vulnerability is present in many places, either fix it or get back to the developers to ask them how they would fix it, for the other teams to use the same fix, the fix from the OPSECs or developers. How did the timing change between implementations? What were the results? Well, it's all in the report. I'll be really concise. We moved scanning tools to jobs of CI/CD. We changed our SBOM collectors as well as the optimizers that